Hey. Welcome to a world of laughter, learning, and entertainment. Welcome to another exciting video, where we'll be shedding light on Total Recall 1990 film. Total Recall is a 1990 American science fiction action film directed by Paul Verhoeven, with a screenplay by Ronald Shusett, Dan O'Bannon, and Gary Goldman. The film stars Arnold Schwarzenegger, Rachel Ticotin, Sharon Stone, Ronny Cox, and Michael Ironside. Based on the 1966 short story We Can Remember It for You Wholesale by Philip Kelvin. Total Recall tells the story of Douglas Quaid Schwarzenegger, a construction worker who receives an implanted memory of a fantastical adventure on Mars. He subsequently finds his adventure occurring in reality as agents of a shadow organization try to prevent him from recovering memories of his past as a Martian secret agent aiming to stop the tyrannical regime of Martian dictator Vilos Cohaagen Cox. Shusett bought the rights to Dick's short story in 1974 and developed a script with O'Bannon. Although considered promising, the ambitious scope kept the project in development hell at multiple studios over 16 years, seeing 40 script drafts, 7 different directors, and multiple actors cast as Quaid. Total Recall eventually entered the early stages of filming in 1987 under the Laurentiis Entertainment Group shortly before its bankruptcy. Schwarzenegger, who had long held an interest in the project but had been dismissed as inappropriate for the lead role, convinced Carolco Pictures to purchase the rights and develop the film with him as the star. On an estimated $1 million budget, making it one of the most expensive films made in its time, filming took place on expansive sets at Estudios Churubusco in Mexico over 6 months. Cast and crew experienced numerous injuries and illnesses during filming. Total Recall was anticipated to be one of the year's most successful films. On its release, the film earned approximately $1 million worldwide, making it the 5th highest-grossing film of the year. Its critical reception was mixed, with reviewers praising its themes of identity and questioning reality, but criticizing content perceived as vulgar and violent. The practical special effects were well received, earning the film an Academy Award, and the score by Gary Goldman has been praised as one of his best works. Since its release, Total Recall has been praised for its ambiguous ending, positing whether Quaid's adventures are real or a fantasy, and it has also been analyzed for themes of authoritarianism and colonialism. Retrospective reviews have called it one of Schwarzenegger's best films and placed it among the best science fiction films ever made. Alongside comic books and video games, Total Recall has been adapted into the 1999 television series Total Recall 2070. An early attempt at a sequel, based on Dick's The Minority Report, became the 2002 standalone film Minority Report, and a 2012 remake, also titled Total Recall, failed to replicate the success of the original. Let's now shift our focus to plot and explore the ways in which it shapes our perspective. In 2084, Mars is a colonized world under the tyrannical regime of Vilos Cohaagen, who controls the mining of valuable turbinium ore. On Earth, construction worker Douglas Quaid experiences recurring dreams about Mars and a mysterious woman. Intrigued, he visits Recall, a company that implants realistic false memories, and chooses one set on Mars with a blue sky where he is a Martian secret agent. However, before the implant is completed, Quaid lashes out, already thinking he is a secret agent. Believing Cohaagen's agency has suppressed Quaid's memories, the Recall employees erase evidence of Quaid's visit and send him home. En route, Quaid is attacked by men led by his colleague Harry because Quaid unknowingly revealed his past. Quaid's instincts take over and he kills his assailants. At home, he is assaulted by his wife Laurie, who claims she was assigned to monitor Quaid by the agency and that their marriage is a false memory implant. He flees but is pursued by armed men led by Richter, Cohaagen's operative and Laurie's real husband. A man who claims to be Quaid's former acquaintance gives him a suitcase containing supplies and a video recording in which Quaid identifies himself as Hauser, a Cohaagen ally who defected after falling in love. According to the recording, Cohaagen brainwashed Hauser to become Quaid and conceal his secrets before securing him on Earth. Hauser instructs Quaid to return to Mars and stop Cohaagen. On Mars, Quaid evades Richter and, following a note from Hauser, travels to Veniceville, a district populated by humans and those mutated by air pollution and solar radiation within the cheaply built domes protecting the colony. Quaid meets Melina, the woman from his dreams, who knows him as Hauser and believes he is still working for Cohaagen. In his hotel room, Quaid is confronted by Laurie and Dr. Ijima from Reckel, who explains that Quaid is still at Reckel on Earth, trapped in his fantasy memory. Quaid notices Ijima is sweating and, believing he is real, kills him. Quaid is captured by Richter's men, but Melina rescues him and Quaid kills Laurie. The pair escape with taxi driver Benny to Veniceville. The mutants lead them to a hidden rebel base, where Quaid meets their leader Quato, a mutant growing out of the abdomen of his brother George. Quato psychically reads Quaid's mind, learning that Cohaagen is hiding a 500,000-year-old alien reactor built into a mountain that, once activated, produces breathable air but could also destroy all turbinium, ending Cohaagen's monopoly over both resources. Benny shoots George, revealing himself to be in Cohaagen's employ, and Cohaagen's forces attack the base, killing the rebels. Quato implores Quaid to start the reactor before Richter executes him. Cohaagen disables Veniceville's air supply to slowly suffocate the remaining inhabitants. Quaid and Melina are brought to Cohaagen, who explains that Hauser was his close friend who volunteered to become Quaid as an elaborate ruse to bypass the mutants' psychic abilities, infiltrate the rebellion, and destroy it. Quaid's Reckel visit had activated him earlier than planned, and Cohaagen has been helping him to survive the oblivious Ritter's pursuit. Cohaagen orders Hauser's memories to be restored in Quaid and Melina to be reprogrammed as his subservient lover, but they manage to escape to the mines below the reactor. Benny, Richter, and his men attack them, but the pair outwits and kills them all. Cohaagen awaits them in the reactor control room, claiming that activating it will destroy the planet. He activates an explosive to destroy the controls, but Quaid throws the explosive into a nearby tunnel, where it explodes and creates a breach to the Martian surface. The explosive decompression blows Cohaagen out to the surface where he suffocates and dies. Quaid activates the reactor before he and Melina are also blown out. The reactor melts the planet's ice core into gas that bursts to the surface, forming a breathable atmosphere and saving Quaid, Melina, and the rest of Mars's population. As everyone beholds the now blue sky, Quaid momentarily wonders if everything was a dream before he and Melina kiss. As we enter this new phase, let's navigate the complexities of cast and discover its practical applications. Arnold Schwarzenegger as Douglas Quaid Carl Hauser, an Earth-based construction worker with a hidden past. Rachel Ticotin as Melina, a Martian freedom fighter. Sharon Stone as Laurie, Quaid's wife revealed to be a secret agent. Ronny Cox as Vilos Cohaagen, the governor of the Martian colony. Michael Ironside as Richter, Cohaagen's ruthless enforcer. Marshall Bell as George Quato voice, the mutant leader of the Martian resistance. Michael Champion as Helm, Ritter's right-hand man. Mel Johnson Jr. as Benny, a Martian taxi driver. Roy Brocksmith as Dr. Ijima, a Reckel employee. Rosemary Dunsmore as Dr. Renata Lull, a Reckel programmer. The Earth-based cast features Ray Baker as Reckel salesman, Bob McLean, Robert Costanzo as Harry, and Alexia Robinson as Tiffany. Robert Picardo provides the voice and visual likeness of John Icob, an automated taxi driver. The Martian cast includes Lysia Nuff as Mary, a mutant three-breasted prostitute, Mark Alamo as Everett, Dean Norris as Tony, Debbie Lee Carrington as Thumbelina, Sasha Rionda as Mutant Child, Mickey Jones as Burly Minor, and Priscilla Allen as Fat Lady. Moving forward, we'll be taking a closer look at early development. The development of Total Recall began in 1974, when producer Ronald Shusett purchased the adaptation rights to science fiction writer Philip Kelvin. Dick's 1966 short story We Can Remember It for You Wholesale for $1,000. Shusett had read the 23-page story by the then little-known pulp fiction writer in an April 1966 edition of the magazine of fantasy and science fiction. Dick's story depicts a meek clerk on Earth named Quail who visits Recall Incorporated to receive a memory implant of being a secret agent on Mars. However, the process uncovers his true identity as a secret agent who previously visited Mars and whose death will bring about an alien invasion. Renaming it Total Recall, Shusett worked with Dan O'Bannon to write the script. O'Bannon exhausted the existing material quickly, and the short story's abrupt ending meant he could only write 30 pages, effectively only the first act, and an original second and third act were needed. He suggested sending Quaid to Mars. Shusett and O'Bannon disagreed over the third act, the former wanting something more dramatic. O'Bannon's ending revealed the handprint on the alien machine as Quaid's, who is a replica of the original, and placing his hand on it grants him total memory recall. O'Bannon described the filmed ending as lame. Dick read the script prior to his death in 1982 and, according to O'Bannon, enjoyed it. Although studios deemed Shusett and O'Bannon's script an ambitious and brilliant idea, it was essentially considered unfilmable, in part because of the extensive special effects and high budget that would be required. The pair moved on to collaborating on the script for the science fiction horror film Alien 1979, the success of which earned Shusett a development deal at Walt Disney Studios. He pursued the Total Recall project at the studio, initially budgeted at $1 million, but the idea did not progress because issues with the third act could not be resolved. The project was sold to Dino De Laurentiis' Laurentiis Entertainment Group (DEG) in 1982. With the groundwork laid, let's now examine development under De Laurentiis Entertainment Group and its connections to our previous discussions. De Laurentiis considered Richard Rush, Louis Teague, Russell Mulcahy, and Fred Shepard to direct the film, before choosing David Cronenberg in 1984. Cronenberg was unfamiliar with Dick's work but was interested in the script. Even so, problems remained with the third act and Cronenberg spent the next year writing 12 separate drafts. In his finished script, Quaid's true identity is Chairman Mandrel, the dictator of Earth who, following a failed assassination attempt on his life, is convinced by Mars Administrator Cohaagen to confront the organization that suppressed his memory. Cohaagen later reveals that Quaid is an inconsequential government worker chosen to play the role of Mandrel to facilitate Cohaagen usurping control of the Earth. Quaid defeats Cohaagen and assumes the identity of Mandrel. Cronenberg was responsible for the mutant characters, including Quato, originally called Quato, and further developed an idea by Shusett about mutant animals, known as Ganzibals. In the Martian sewers, Cronenberg made them mutant camels. Cronenberg found himself at odds with Shusett regarding the tone, as Shusett and De Laurentiis did not want it to be as serious as the science fiction film Blade Runner, an adaptation of Dick's novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? 1968. Shusett described Cronenberg's work as bringing the film back to Dick's original short story, whereas they wanted an adventure closer to Raiders of the Lost Ark Go to Mars. Cronenberg did not want to make that film and chose to quit. He was also frustrated by his disagreements with Shusett and De Laurentiis, and the casting of Richard Dreyfuss in the lead role. Dreyfuss had requested further rewrites to have Quaid reflect the everyman persona he had established in his previous films, rather than the action focus of the Shusett-O'Bannon story. Cronenberg had wanted to cast William Hurt as the lead instead and focus more on the concepts of memory and identity. Christopher Reeve and Jeff Bridges were also considered for Quaid. De Laurentiis threatened to sue Cronenberg for quitting but was placated by Cronenberg agreeing to work with him on a different film. A few years later, De Laurentiis offered Cronenberg the opportunity to make Total Recall as he had wanted, but Cronenberg was not interested and did not want to argue with Shusett again. De Laurentiis sought to keep the budget low following the financial failure of Dune 1984, and wanted to reduce costs by eliminating Mars entirely, but Shusett and O'Bannon dissented. Problems with finalizing the script and the high budget continued to stall Total Recall for the next few years. In 1987, De Laurentiis again considered hiring Rush as director, but De Laurentiis disliked the finale featuring a breathable atmosphere on Mars while Rush supported the idea. De Laurentiis accepted he was wrong after hiring director Bruce Beresford, who also supported the ending. Around this time, writer Gary Goldman was offered an opportunity to refine the script, but he turned it down to focus on his own project, called Warrior, that he was working on alongside director Paul Verhoeven at Warner Bros. Pictures. Beresford began preparations for a version of Total Recall described by Shusett as less gritty and more Spielbergian in tone, and Patrick Swayze was cast as Quaid. Set construction was underway in Australia when DEG filed for bankruptcy in 1988. Approximately 80 crew were fired and the sets had to be destroyed. By this point, the project had already accrued $1 million in pre-production costs and $1 million in turnaround costs, a process allowing other studios to purchase the idea. Without further ado, let's move on to the topic of development under Carolco Pictures. Arnold Schwarzenegger became aware of Total Recall in the mid-years, either during filming of Commando 1985 or Rodeo 1986. He liked the script and agreed to pursue it alongside producer Joel Silver while filming Predator 1987, but the project remained unrealized due to its prohibitive budget and because De Laurentiis did not think Schwarzenegger was right for the lead role. Following Dig's bankruptcy, Schwarzenegger convinced Andrew G. Viner and Mario Casa, co-owners of the independent film studio Carolco Pictures, with whom he had made Red Heat 1988, to purchase the rights for $1 million, including pre-production costs. Schwarzenegger wanted to star in the film, pending rewrites to his satisfaction, and his fame and international appeal justified the studio investing the necessary budget. Carolco completed its acquisition of the majority of Dig's business and assets in April 1989. Schwarzenegger was given substantial influence over the project. He retained Shusett as a screenwriter and co-producer alongside producer Buzz Feischens, and oversaw script revisions, casting decisions, and set construction. He described himself as effectively an executive producer without the responsibility, but he involved himself heavily because he wanted the project to work. He received a $1 million salary, plus 15% of the film's profits. Schwarzenegger hired Verhoeven as the director after being impressed by his science fiction film RoboCop 1987, for which Schwarzenegger had been considered in the lead role. Verhoeven had previously been courted by Shusett to direct the film based on his work on Soldier of Orange 1977, but declined then because he did not like science fiction. Even so, Verhoeven accepted Schwarzenegger's offer after reading the Mars Hotel scene where Dr. Ijima attempts to convince Quaid he is still on Earth. Verhoeven had wanted to avoid special effects-heavy films after RoboCop and said that he did not realize how much effects work would be involved. He requested Goldman be brought in to help with rewrites, as well as some core personnel from RoboCop, including cinematographer Jost Vacano, production designer William Sandell, and special effects artist Rob Bottin. By this point, approximately 30 drafts had been completed, credited to a combination of Shusett and either O'Bannon, John Povell, or Stephen Pressfield, among others. Verhoeven read each one and highlighted those he wanted Goldman to reference. Brace yourself for an enlightening exploration of writing as we dive into its profound implications. Goldman had little knowledge of Dick's work but tried to respect the source material and work of previous screenwriters. He considered the second half of the film a concession to traditional Hollywood narratives and so retained most of the structure from Beresford's shooting script. Because the creative team wanted to commence soon, Goldman believed he did not have the freedom to make substantial changes to the script and focused on refining the existing content and making the scientific aspects more realistic. Verhoeven and Schwarzenegger agreed that everything after Dr. Ijima's visit to Quaid on Mars was not working. Verhoeven wanted a significant change to indicate that Ijoma could be telling the truth and Quaid is actually having a mental breakdown on Earth. Goldman rewrote the script to make it possible for the film to be viewed as both reality and fantasy. He also made Hauser an ally to Cohaagen, clearly defining Quaid and Hauser as separate identities. Goldman believed that making Hauser evil would better justify Quaid not returning to his original personality. It would also explain why Hauser becomes Quaid, to conceal his intentions from the psychic mutants. Goldman made the Benny character a villain because he believed African Americans were typically typecast as good characters and the reveal would be surprising. The script also had to be revised to match Schwarzenegger's action hero public image, although Goldman tried to make it less comical than some of the actor's previous films. The meek clerk Quayle was renamed Quaid to avoid referencing then Vice President Dan Quayle, and became a muscle-bound construction worker, while fight scenes were rewritten to include more feats of strength and less martial arts or running. Second unit director and stunt coordinator Vic Armstrong, among other stunt people who had worked with Schwarzenegger on Conan the Barbarian 1982 and Red Sonja 1985, said that they knew what he could physically do without looking silly. Schwarzenegger also wanted more creative methods to dispatch Quaid's foes because he had been criticized for an over-reliance on guns to kill people in films like Commando. After Goldman's first rewrite, he discussed it with Verhoeven, Schwarzenegger, Shusett, Weiner, and Carcer. Schwarzenegger and Shusett believed the climax lacked emotion, which was an intentional choice by Verhoeven, who did not take the Martian rebel plot very seriously and prioritized the intellectual aspects of the narrative. To appease Schwarzenegger, Goldman conceived of Cohaagen shutting off the oxygen to the mutants in Veniceville. After nearly 16 years in development, 7 directors, 4 co-writers, and 40 script drafts, Total Recall went into production. In the following section, we'll be immersing ourselves in the captivating world of cast and characters. Verhoeven chose Michael Ironside to portray Cohaagen's henchman Richter. Ironside had previously auditioned for the lead in RoboCop, and Verhoeven had also offered him the role of antagonist Clarence Bodica, which he turned down because he did not want to portray another psychopath character following his role in Extreme Prejudice 1987. Ironside said he considered Richter more of a sociopath, who had personal ambitions and covets Cohaagen's position. Turning down a role on RoboCop and a separate film had created the impression that Ironside was difficult to work with, so he had to complete an audition before being offered the role. In it, he portrayed someone having an emotional breakdown leading to him lying on the floor crying as Verhoeven moved in for a close-up shot. Schwarzenegger believed Ironside's physical presence made him a credible threat to his portrayal of Quaid. The female leads, Rachel Ticotin and Sharon Stone, were chosen in part for their athleticism, which was needed for the physically demanding roles. Stone said that her physically formidable character resulted in the cast and crew treating her like she was one of the guys, and that Ironside was the one guy who never forgot I was a woman. When I was thrown down, he would help me up. Verhoeven's daughters were responsible for casting Benny, picking Mel Johnson Jr.'s screen test for the available options. He recounted having just finished filming a horrible black exploitation film when he read the Total Recall script and, after seeing Benny described as a black jivster, he threw the script across the room. Nonetheless, he eventually read it through and decided to audition because he believed the character was more fully realized, saying this guy is cold and calculating and the story was intriguing. Cox had previously worked with Verhoeven on RoboCop and traded on the actor's history of playing good-natured characters to make his villainous turn more impactful. Describing his portrayal, Cox said that he did not employ method acting but did try to understand how the character would feel and think and how he would react to situations, and that would determine his performance. The character's hairstyle came about after Cox's hair was slicked back in order to make a face mold for special effects purposes. Cox knew it was the right look and convinced Verhoeven to reshoot 2 days of Cox's scenes with the new style. When Marshall Bell auditioned for the role, the script did not explain the relationship between George and Quato, and he was confused as to why George had so few lines. Although voice actors were considered for Quato, Verhoeven decided to use Bell. Verhoeven based the appearance and physicality of Brock Smith's Dr. Ijeoma on the central scientist character portrayed by Paul Newman in Alfred Hitchcock's 1966 thriller Torn Curtain. He wanted an actor who looked naive and strange and a bit weird. Get ready to uncover the mysteries surrounding filming and post-production as we navigate its intriguing terrain. Principal photography for Total Recall began filming between April-May 1989. Filmed almost entirely in sequence, a rare feat, production took place over 20 weeks. The initial budget was reported as $1 million, but the final budget was reported as being between $1 million and $1 million. Total Recall was filmed almost entirely on sets at Estudios Churubusco in Mexico City, Mexico, where 43 cast and up to 500 crew members worked across 45 sets on 10 soundstages. The Earth train station was filmed in the Mexico City metro, and many exterior Mars scenes took place at the Valley of Fire State Park in Overton, Nevada. Shusett and Goldman were present on set, providing additional rewrites where necessary. Goldman estimated the script was changed less than 1%. Verhoeven sometimes required up to 20 takes of scenes, but remained faithful to the script and discouraged improvisation. Even so, some scenes, such as Benny's death, lacked sufficient detail, and in these cases dialogue was mostly improvised. Although Verhoeven had been adamant that he did not want a second unit director, having fired 3 of them on Robocop, and Strong ended up filming 1,200 different setups and all of the fight scenes. Verhoeven was happy with his work. Armstrong's first scene was filming Schwarzenegger drilling cement. Filming was beset by injuries and illness. Almost everyone involved suffered from dust inhalation on set. Food poisoning and gastroenteritis from the local Mexican cuisine was also a problem, except for Shusett and Schwarzenegger, who had his food brought from the United States after a negative experience while filming Predator in Mexico. The illness compounded the difficulties Licia Naff had filming her scenes as the three-breasted prostitute. She said she felt like crying because even though the breasts were artificial, she felt exposed in front of the cast and crew. Schwarzenegger cut his wrist while smashing a train window after an explosive designed to pre-detonate the glass failed. His injuries were patched up and concealed by his jacket. He also incurred other minor cuts and broken fingers. Ironside cracked his sternum and separated 2 ribs after running into Michael Champion, who was holding an Uzi during the pursuit of Quaid and Melina in a Martian hotel. Filming had to be paused while he recovered, as Richter was involved in most of the remaining scenes. After 3 weeks, a producer asked that he return to filming, but they could not obtain insurance unless Ironside performed 50 push-ups. Despite the doctor's advice, he attempted the feat and re-injured himself after 30 push-ups. The doctor said it was sufficient. Ironside's first scene upon his return involved him fighting Schwarzenegger on an elevator, but he struggled to lift his arm. The doctor had Oakland Raiders quarterback Jim Plunkett drop off a brace built for his own injury, which held Ironside's chest in a stable position, although it made breathing difficult. Ironside filmed his scene over the remainder of the day, only being hit once accidentally by Schwarzenegger, who was cautious due to his condition. A separate fight between Stone and Ticotin was arranged to feature one of the actresses and one stunt person because padding could not be concealed under their outfits. Verhoeven wanted the actresses to perform the fight stunts themselves, but Armstrong insisted on using a stunt person. Schwarzenegger was known for his pranks on the set, such as arranging styrofoam snowball fights and water pistol battles during dinners, as well as booking parties to reward the crew for the 6-day working weeks and practical stunts. Even so, Ironside recounted how Schwarzenegger helped him stay in regular contact with his ill sister using the personal phone in his trailer, at a time before widespread use of mobile phones or internet access. Ironside later learned Schwarzenegger was also regularly calling his sister to check on her. Initially scheduled for release on June 15, Total Recall's post-production schedule was rushed to move the date forward 2 weeks to avoid competition from other films, particularly Dick Tracy with its cast of popular stars. Editor Frank J. Uriosti worked overtime to complete Total Recall's 113-minute cut early. This meant there was no time to test screen the film, which Verhoeven and Goldman believed worked against the finished product, including its third act. The film also had to be trimmed to remove violent content and gore, including a longer version of Benny's death, to avoid an X rating, which would have restricted attendance to audience members over the age of 17. Total Recall ultimately received an R rating, allowing younger people to see it when accompanied by an adult. Prepare yourself for an in-depth analysis of special effects and design in this section. The development of the film's special effects was led by DreamQuest Images, with Eric Brevig serving as visual effects supervisor, Alex Funk as special effects photographer, Thomas L. Fisher as special effects supervisor, William Sandel as production designer, and Mary Sisloff as effects producer. Rob Bottin, who previously worked with Verhoeven on RoboCop, provided the character visual effects. Concept artist Ron Cobb and illustrator Ron Miller contributed to designs for technology, vehicles, and locations. Additional effects were provided by Metrolight Studios and Industrial Light and Magic. Total Recall features over 100 visual effects, including miniatures and blue screen effects. The film was made at the onset of computer-generated imagery CGI, which was not a suitable option for photorealistic or textured imagery, and was used mainly in the X-ray machine sequence. Most other effects were practical, employing sophisticated prosthetics and animatronics to realize automated taxi drivers, fat lady disguises, mutants, and scenes of explosive decompression. Total Recall features 35 sets across 8 of Estudios Churubusco's soundstages. The sets were expansive and connected by tunnels so long that they continued outside of the stage, making it possible to drive between them on film. Expansive locations, including Martian exteriors, were created using miniature sets produced by Stetson Visual Services in Los Angeles and supervised by Mark Stetson and Robert Spurlock. The sets were large, with the alien reactor being among the largest and most complex sets ever constructed in cinema, and the largest set built for the film. It had to be built vertically to fit on DreamQuest's stage. Even so, it was limited by the high ceilings. The Martian mountain set was also substantial, measuring tall and in diameter, with only the front side constructed, allowing special effects to be operated from behind. Get ready for a thought-provoking discussion as we delve into music and its impact on our understanding. The score was composed by Gary Goldman. The producers intended to have him record the score in Munich because the pay for musicians there was lower, but the players were unfamiliar with Goldsmith's style and the resulting score was disappointing. Instead, Goldsmith was given the funding necessary to record the score in London with the National Philharmonic Orchestra, who were more fitting to Goldsmith's musical intentions with brass and string instruments combined with electronic sounds. The recording was put on hiatus for 3 months so Verhoeven could have time to edit the special effects, during which Goldsmith recorded the score for Gremlins 2, the new batch 1990, before returning to finish his work on Total Recall. Goldsmith also performed the commercial jingles and elevator music heard in the film, and composer Bruno Lauchauan provided additional pieces heard on Mars. In this section, we'll be exploring context. Following the previous year's record $1 billion box office, more films than ever were expected to surpass $1 million at box office as 50 films were scheduled for release during the summer theater season of 1990 May 18 September 3. Dick Tracy was predicted to dominate the box office, and films such as Another 48ers, Back to the Future Part 3, Days of Thunder, Die Hard 2, RoboCop 2, and Total Recall were expected to perform well based on their brand recognition and star appeal. These films were all scheduled for release by the end of June to ensure a long theatrical run during the peak time of the year, and other releases were scheduled to avoid opening against them. The importance of domestic box office grosses was also decreasing as studios increasingly earned profits from home media releases, television rights, and markets outside of the United States and Canada. These growing markets were, in turn, increasing film production costs as stars commanded higher salaries to compensate for their international appeal, with Total Recall, Die Hard 2, and Days of Thunder among the most expensive films being released. Average salaries for male leads had also increased to between $1 million. In this part of the video, we'll be delving deeper into marketing and analyzing its key components. External media float right video the teaser for Total Recall, made by distributor TriStar Pictures, disappointed Schwarzenegger and tested poorly with audiences. It lacked the action scenes and special effects, and presented the film in vague, dramatic way. Schwarzenegger believed it cheapened the film, saying it looks like a $1 million movie in this trailer. It's like a $1 million movie. He contacted Peter Guber, the head of TriStar's owner Sony Pictures Studios, who contracted a different company, Simran Breen, to produce a new trailer focusing on the action and special effects. It fared much better with audiences and attracted praise from industry professionals, such as Joel Silver. In this section, we'll be shedding light on box office and its impact on our understanding of the subject. In the US and Canada, Total Recall was released on June 1990 in 2,060 theaters. It grossed $1 million, an average of $12,395 per theater, and finished as the #1 film of the weekend, ahead of Back to the Future Part III, $1 million, which was in its second weekend of release, and Bird on a Wire, $1 million, in its third. This figure gave it the highest opening weekend gross of the year to date, narrowly beating Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, $1 million. This was also the highest opening for an R-rated film, and one of the 10 highest grossing 3-day opening weekends ever. The film fell to #2 in its second weekend, with an additional gross of $1 million, a decline of 41%, behind the debut of Another 48ers, $1 million, and to the #3 position in its third week with an additional gross of $1 million, behind Another 48ers, $1 million, and the debut of Dick Tracy, $1 million. By mid-July, the film had earned over $1 million and was classified as a success. During the remainder of its 16-weekend theatrical run, Total Recall never regained the #1 position, leaving the top 10 highest-grossing films by the end of July. Total Recall earned an approximate total box office gross of $1 million. This figure made it the second highest-grossing film of the summer, behind the surprise success of Ghost, and the seventh highest-grossing film of the year behind The Hunt for Red October, $1 million, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, $1 million, Pretty Woman, $1 million, Dances with Wolves, $1 million, Ghost, $1 million, and Home Alone, $1 million. Figures are unavailable for all theatrical releases outside of the US and Canada, but the film is estimated to have earned a further $1 million, giving it a cumulative worldwide gross of $1 million, making it the fifth highest-grossing film of the year, behind Dances with Wolves, $1 million, Pretty Woman, $1 million, Home Alone, $1 million, and Ghost, $1 million. Taking into account production fees, interest, residual payments, and other costs, Total Recall is estimated to have returned $1 million in profit to the studio. In this section, we'll be peeling back the layers of critical response to reveal its true essence. On its release, Total Recall received mixed reviews from critics, who generally praised the production values and Schwarzenegger's performance, but criticized the violent content. Audience polls by CinemaScore reported moviegoers gave the film an average grade of a on scale. The narrative polarized reviewers. Some praised it as an above-average, complex, and visually interesting science fiction film that successfully blends humor with satirization of the genre's tropes, while others found it lacked humor, romance, or a strong narrative structure. Gene Siskel and Peter Travers believed the latter half of the film, After Quaid Reaches Mars, to be where Total Recall became mechanical, abandoning logic and artistic ambition for excessive action and violence. Travers described it as a transitory blockbuster in contrast to the Terminator 1984, also starring Schwarzenegger, which he said would haunt our dreams. Several reviewers agreed that the hotel confrontation between Quaid and Rickles' Dr. Ijima on Mars, in which the former learns everything he has experienced is potentially a dream, was the best scene, and found the concept of overwriting memories and identity to be a genuinely horrifying concept. Jonathan Rosenbaum called it a worthy entry in the dystopian genre initiated by Blade Runner that avoided being derivative of its predecessors. The film was often compared to Verhoeven's previous work on RoboCop, with some reviews remarking that Total Recall lacked the same impudence and incandescence or satirization of Earth's action films as the earlier film. Some said the film was only fun when Verhoeven inserted moments of RoboCop's camp style. The Washington Post's review compared it unfavorably with the Sylvester Stallone action film Cobra 1986, saying it was disappointing in its overuse of violence and abandonment of cynicism and creativity for machismo and misogyny. Several reviews focused on the excessive violence, with Vincent Canby describing it as part of an influx of action-adventure films featuring numerous deaths, counting 74 kills in the film and over 200 in Die Hard 2. Some were concerned by the dismissive and sometimes comical depiction of the deaths, and the general reliance on violence as a solution to all problems posed. Even so, the Los Angeles Times review said the violence never seemed to be deliberately sadistic or callous. Despite this criticism, Botton's practical effects were roundly praised, particularly the three-breasted prostitute and mutants that provided many of the film's standout visuals, despite their sometimes perverse or macabre nature. Reviews praised Schwarzenegger for playing against his public action hero image by portraying a confused, vulnerable, and sympathetic character, with Roger Ebert considering him vital to the film's success. Desenhow and Travers described it as Schwarzenegger's finest and most interesting work since The Terminator. Even so, others believed the actor's Superman presence and comic one-liners were out of place and undermined attempts to make the audience emotionally connect with Quaid's genuine fears about his identity. Janet Maslin wrote that this was further harmed by the narrative failing to emphasize his dual identities. Some reviews considered the role to be beyond Schwarzenegger's acting abilities, describing him as unusually oafish, a cross between Frankenstein's monster, a hockey puck, and Colonel Klink, incapable of generating a romantic connection with Stone's or Ticotin's characters. Some female reviewers were critical of the film's treatment of women, who they perceived as hybrid hooker commandos and basically whores, writing that the three-breasted prostitute is the film's idea of a witty mutation, while Ticotin registers less strongly than Stone's ambiguous, blonde slut wife. Moving forward, we'll be taking a closer look at Accolades. At the 63rd Academy Awards in 1991, Total Recall won the award for Best Visual Effects. Eric Brevig, Rob Bottin, Tim McGovern, and Alex Funk. The film received a further 2 nominations, Best Sound Nelson Stoll, Michael J. Coat, Carlos Del Arios, and Aaron Rockin, and Best Sound Effects Editing Stephen Hunter Flick. At the 44th British Academy Film Awards, the film received 1 nomination, for Best Special Visual Effects, losing to the comedy film Honey, I Shrunk the Kids 1989. At the 17th Saturn Awards, Total Recall was named Best Science Fiction Film. It was also nominated for a Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation, losing to fantasy romance film Edward Scissorhands. With the foundation laid, let's embark on a journey into aftermath. Following Total Recall, Schwarzenegger's popularity continued to grow as he went on to star in Kindergarten Cop 1990, Terminator 2, Judgment Day 1991, and True Lies 1994, earning over $1 billion combined at the box office and solidifying his status as the most popular international film celebrity, based on surveys of studio executives and talent agents. Verhoeven worked with Stone again when he directed the box office success Basic Instinct 1992 for Carolco. Despite their desire to collaborate on another project, Schwarzenegger and Verhoeven did not work together again. Their last attempt to do so, the big-budget historical drama Crusade, was abandoned by Carolco in the mid-years in favor of Cutthroat Island 1995, a box office flop that contributed to Carolco entering bankruptcy the same year. Shusett and Goldman did not like aspects of Total Recall, believing it was overly long and failed to make the audience care about the mutants, as well as disliking the excessive swearing, violence, and deaths. They also thought the special effects of Schwarzenegger's and Ticotin's swelling heads went on too long and, alongside Verhoeven, they regretted the rushed post-production and lack of test screenings to solicit feedback that could have led to a tighter re-edit on the third act. Total Recall also failed to impress Cronenberg, who believed Schwarzenegger was not the right actor for the lead role. 2 lawsuits followed the film's release. John Jaginch, a prop maker, sued for $1 million, alleging that his credit was removed from Total Recall after he refused permission for Carolco to merchandise a survival knife he made for it. A separate suit, also for $1 million, was brought by the Southern California Consortium, who said Total Recall used animated sequences they had created for scientific videos about planets orbiting the sun. The outcomes of these lawsuits are unknown. As we progress through this video, let's now turn our gaze towards home media. Total Recall was released on VHS and Laserdisc on November 1, 1990. It was rushed out to take advantage of the Christmas season. It was priced at $24.99, a relatively low figure compared to standard prices closer to $90, because audience research had shown a willingness to purchase the film due to its watchability. Although retailers normally avoided selling films with violent or sexual content, they were willing to stock Total Recall. It was predicted to perform well as a purchase and rental. It became one of the best-selling home entertainment products of the year, in which purchases outperformed rentals for the first time. It was also one of the top rentals in December, trading the #1 position back and forth with Pretty Woman. The film was first released on DVD in 2000 and received criticism from IGN for what was perceived as poor image quality. It was followed by a special edition version in 2001 that included a commentary track with Verhoeven and Schwarzenegger and a documentary about the film's production, including its release and subsequent reaction. A special Total Recall, mind-bending edition Blu-ray was released in 2012, featuring a high-definition restoration from the original negative. This version included a new interview with Verhoeven and a comparison of the restored footage against the original. For its 30th anniversary in 2021, the film was remastered as a high-resolution Ultra HD Blu-ray, including a digital copy based on a digital scan from the original film negatives under Verhoeven's supervision, as well as content from the 2012 Blu-ray. This release introduced a 60-minute documentary about the success and failure of Carolco Pictures, and retrospectives on the film's score, special effects, and production. A separate 5-disc collector's edition was released with a double-sided poster, art cards, essays about the film, and a score on compact disc CD. Goldsmith's score was first released on CD in 1990 with 10 tracks. A deluxe edition was released in 2000 with 27 tracks. Coinciding with the 30th anniversary, Quartet Records released the remastered soundtrack on a 2-CD and limited edition 3-vinyl record set. The anniversary edition included the score plus alternates and source music, restored by Goldsmith's longtime sound mixer Bruce Botnick. Now, we shift our focus to other media topic that deserves our attention. A novelization of the film, written by Piers Anthony and based on the script and Dick's original novel, was released in 1990. It retains the original character name of Douglas Quaid. That same year, an action platformer video game, Total Recall, was released for the Commodore 64, Amstrad CPC, and Nintendo Entertainment System, and Amiga and Atari ST computers. A ZX Spectrum version was planned but cancelled because it would not be ready for the Christmas 1990 release date. A comic book adaptation of the film was also released in 1990 by DC Comics. A 2011 4-issue miniseries comic book was released by Dynamite Entertainment. Written by Vince Moore with art by Cesar Rezac, the series narrative continues on from the end of the film, depicting Quaid dealing with a Mars still in chaos following Cohaagen's death. Moving forward, we'll be taking a closer look at themes. The main theme of Total Recall is the question of whether or not Quaid's experiences are real or a dream induced by his failed recall memory implantation. Despite the film's deviations from Dick's original story, both focus on this theme. Verhoeven explicitly wanted both possibilities to be viable, although his personal preference is that Quaid's experiences are a dream. He explained it's a dream, which is disturbing to the audience because they don't want that, of course. They want an adventure story, they don't want a fake adventure story. So they are on side trying to believe that it's all true, while is trying to tell him that it's not true. Quaid chooses to believe in his reality and kills Dr. Ijeoma. Laurie confirming that the Quaid persona is effectively a dream breaks down the barrier between reality and fantasy, leaving Quaid and the audience unable to definitively determine the reality of what they are experiencing. It is left up to the audience to determine what is real, and because of Schwarzenegger's public image as a superhuman action hero, the possibility remains that Quaid's adventures on Mars are real. Verhoeven said that rewatching the film can induce more doubt in the audience, particularly when the recall manager, Rob McClane, effectively outlines everything that will happen to Quaid after the memory implantation. During the same scene, Melina is shown on the recall screen before Quaid has met her. At the film's end, Quaid still questions if everything is a dream, and Melina suggests that he kiss her before he wakes up. English professor Jason P. Vest said that by not including herself in Quaid's possible delusion, Melina both suggests and denies she is a creation of Quaid's fantasy. Ironside stated that he believed the film is an analog for manipulating reality for the common people through news and the media at the behest of those in power. Writer Beckley believed that this theme remains relevant in the age of social media, where the line between a person's average life and more curated online life becomes blurred. Another theme of Total Recall is the meaning of identity in a world where memories are commodities that can be erased or fabricated completely. Vest contrasted this with Blade Runner, in which memory is presented as a precious and vital component of the human experience, while in Total Recall, memories can be easily removed, replaced, or revised, and these changes are generally embraced. When Quaid learns that he is really Hauser, he affirms to himself "I am Quaid" and rejects the Hauser personality. Author David Hughes wrote that Quaid is not an altered version of Hauser but a completely separate personality with his own memories and morality. He contrasted Quaid with Blade Runner's replicant's artificial humans, except that it is Quaid's mind that is artificial. Quaid is forced to choose between returning to his original but antagonistic persona or remaining as the artificial but benevolent construct of Quaid. Hughes considered this an interesting moral choice and true to Dick's work. Quaid is offered a chance at a better life by being restored to Hauser's higher social status, but will lose himself in the process. Goldman believed Quaid's refusal to be the authentic choice because he did not believe someone would willingly and permanently give up their identity. Sci-fi writer Noah Berlatsky said that as an everyday worker who desires grand adventures, Quaid is an audience stand-in, and suggested the hologram projector that creates a duplicate image of Quaid to be akin to the audience viewing themselves through the phantom personality that is Quaid. The film presents a politically, morally, and visually unattractive future in which the Earth's locations are covered in brutalist, concrete architecture. Verhoeven specifically chose to use this style because he believed it suggested a cruel society indifferent to the suffering of the Martian colonists as long as turbinium ore mining continues. Mars is represented ubiquitously with various red hues, invoking associations with blood, danger, and a hellish domain. The in-film propaganda networks show reality being altered in real time, as they brand the resistance as terrorists and describe the indiscriminate slaughter of them as restoring order with minimal use of force. In the upcoming portion, we'll be dissecting analysis to gain a comprehensive understanding of its implications. According to Vest and English professor Frank Grady, most political assessments of the film considered it left-wing for its anti-corporation and revolutionary message, but Vest perceived a more conservative subtext in which the white protagonist saves a society of the less well-off who cannot save themselves. They identified Total Recall as one of many films produced throughout the era, such as Rambo, First Blood Part I 1985, and Predator, that were fronted by white male characters who employ violence to preserve American righteousness, liberty, autonomy, and reinforce an idealistic American image of combating unnecessary bureaucracy, fascists, communists, and foreign and domestic threats. Schwarzenegger identified himself as a conservative and supporter of U.S. President Ronald Reagan, which Vest opined made him an unusual choice to portray the protagonist who liberates Mars from Cohaagen's dictatorship. Quaid's rejection of the Hauser persona can be seen as an example of self-determination and American exceptionalism, but in doing so he also avoids responsibility or punishment for Hauser's acts, which Grady considered an act of moral cynicism. Historian Stephen Prince described Quaid's choice not as the loss of self, but conscious rejection of it. Remarking on the similarities between Total Recall and the science fiction film The Matrix 1999, educator Neil King found that both protagonists begin as discontented workers who learn their life is a fabrication, become instrumental to those rebelling against overwhelming authority, and eventually learn they were deliberately created to quash the rebellion. Any good deeds they perform are a result of who they were programmed to be, meaning their free will is an illusion. Grady and sci-fi writer Stephanie Williams described the privatization of air in Total Recall as the extreme of unchecked corporate power, comparing it to the real-world privatization of water sources by companies whose core incentive is to increase profits, such as in the Flint water crisis. The mutants on Mars are the result of early colonists exposed to a toxic atmosphere because of cheap domes, and their offspring still serve Cohaagen, meaning the authorities have escaped any responsibility for their involvement. In the end, Cohaagen suffocates in a toxic atmosphere that he could have changed at any time. The film also contains a number of product placements for brands such as Pepsi, Coca-Cola, and Jack in the Box, promoting corporate interests while portraying an anti-corporate stance. Linda Majewski, a professor of women's studies at the Ohio State University, suggests that the name Cohaagen is supposed to sound Afrikaans, and this, along with the character's links to the mining industry, is part of an analogy between apartheid-era South Africa, in which there was a highly prosperous mining industry, and sharply defined class divisions, akin to those in the film between the mining executives and the ordinary, oppressed Martians. Likewise, Olive considered the relationship between the lower classes on Mars and the government to be analogous to real-world colonial and post-colonial social structures, such as apartheid. The technology that undermines the existing power structure is a metaphor for decolonization and championing the voices of the oppressed. Vest believed Total Recall did not offer a positive representation of minorities, as Benny, the only important African-American character, collaborates with Cohaagen and helps assassinate the Martian freedom fighter Quato. Vest believed that his repeated references to having multiple children reinforced stereotypes of African-American men as irresponsible and promiscuous, and that his alliance with Cohaagen presents the character as untrustworthy, selfish, and corrupt. Vest identified certain elements in the film as sexist and misogynistic. Many female characters are presented as prostitutes or mutants, which he believed suggested that femininity is a source of moral or physical deformity. Many female characters are violently killed throughout, such as Laurie, who is dispatched while Schwarzenegger quips that she should consider that a divorce. However, while Melina is sometimes reliant on Quaid to save her, both she and Laurie are portrayed as effective fighters, and Melina is essential to saving Quaid's life at the end. Union College Film Studies co-director Michelle Chilcote wrote that Total Recall began a decade of cyberpunk films that focused on a separation and transformation of the mind away from a traditional human body, such as The Lawnmower Man 1992, Strange Days 1995, and The Matrix. Even so, Chilcote argues that given the option to become anything theatrical, Total Recall repeatedly asserts Quaid's heterosexuality. Brace yourselves for the next chapter, where we'll be dissecting modern reception. Since its release, several publications have named Total Recall as one of the greatest science fiction films ever made. Rotten Tomatoes named it one of the 300 essential films to watch, and it is also listed in the book 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating from the aggregated reviews of critics, with an average score of. The consensus reads, under Paul Verhoeven's frenetic direction, Total Recall is a fast-paced rush of violence, gore, and humor that never slacks. The film has a score of 57 out of 100 on Metacritic based on 15 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. In a 2012 retrospective, Vulture wrote that despite its anachronistic aspects, such as outdated technology, Total Recall remained relevant, particularly in its themes of the oppressed fighting back against their oppressors, which was compared to the 2011 Occupy Wall Street movement. Discussing the film in 2016, the AV Club described it as one of the best style action films. Other publications have called it one of Schwarzenegger's most entertaining films and one of his best roles. The film's score, by Gary Goldman, is considered among his finest work and, in his own words, one of his greatest scores. A 2020 inverse retrospective argued that Total Recall, not Blade Runner, was the best adaptation of Dick's work, despite its deviations from the source material. He argued that Blade Runner presented a stylish and cool future, whereas Total Recall presents an ugly, banal, and grimy future. Similarly, he believed Quaid's upbeat, immoral intro protagonist was closer to Dick's traditional protagonists. Even so, Comic Book Resources wrote that its weirdness and appreciation of dumb fun meant that it would probably never be as highly considered as Blade Runner or films such as 2001, A Space Odyssey 1968. To mark Schwarzenegger's 75th birthday in 2022, Variety listed Total Recall as the fourth best film in his 46-year career. In this chapter, we'll be unraveling the enigma of cultural influence and discovering its transformative power. Total Recall became one of the most expensive films ever made in its time, and one of the last big-budget films to use almost entirely practical special effects. It is also seen as among the films responsible for a significant rise in the costs of film production because of the high salaries studios like Carolco paid to stars with international appeal such as Schwarzenegger, Stallone, and Mel Gibson, recouping their investment by selling their films to the rapidly growing film markets outside of the US and Canada. Alongside the boost to Schwarzenegger's career, Total Recall also redefined Stone from a model to a legitimate film star. A 2020 Sci-Fi article credited Total Recall as one of 3 action films, along with Terminator 2 and True Lies 1994, that revived Schwarzenegger's career after a series of less successful action films such as The Running Man 1987 and Red Heat. Schwarzenegger recounted coming across the film on television that year and believing it still held up, saying, "That is really great filmmaking when you can, after 30 years, watch a movie and it still feels the same." Schwarzenegger also named his 2012 memoir Total Recall. In 2020, The Guardian wrote that, with hindsight, Total Recall formed the middle of Verhoeven's unofficial science fiction action film trilogy about authoritarian governance, following RoboCop and preceding Starship Troopers 1997. Quaid's line, "Consider that a divorce, after killing Laurie," is considered one of Schwarzenegger's most iconic one-line quips from his filmography, and the three-breasted prostitute, portrayed by Licia Knopf, is regarded as an iconic character in cinematic history. Although she eventually came to terms with the role, Nath was initially embarrassed by her appearance in Total Recall and avoided interviews or fan interactions, saying, "I decided not to answer every letter from every prisoner in the world who was writing to me." Total Recall influenced films such as The Matrix, The Sixth Day 2000, also starring Schwarzenegger, as well as other media such as Rick and Morty, South Park, and The Expanse. It has been referenced in politics when, during his 2020 address to the Austrian World Summit Climate Conference about the urgency of their 2050 climate neutrality goal, Dutch politician and European Commissioner for Climate Action, Frans Timmermans, said, "It's been 30 years since Total Recall and Kindergarten Cop. I mean, these things go so fast. We have to act now and we can." In this chapter, we'll be shedding light on sequel and adaptations and its role in shaping our understanding. Total Recall's success led to development of a sequel. Goldman had optioned another of Dick's works, the 1956 novella The Minority Report, intending to direct it himself. Unable to make progress on that project, he and Shusett worked together on adapting The Minority Report into a Total Recall sequel in 1993, depicting Quaid as the head of an organization that uses mutants with precognition abilities to predict and stop crimes before they happen. Carolco struggled to secure either funding or Schwarzenegger's interest to progress the project before its bankruptcy. The television rights to Total Recall were bought by DFL Entertainment for $1 million to develop the television series Total Recall 2070-1999. The show, set entirely on Earth, was not based on the film and was described by author David Hughes as closer to a Blade Runner adaptation. In the interim, Shusett and Goldman had removed the Total Recall elements from their script to develop it as a standalone film, Minority Report 2002. The film rights to Total Recall were bought by Dimension Films for $1 million at Carolco's bankruptcy auction. The studio began development of a sequel, intending to bring back the principal cast, but not Verhoeven. Matt Cyrulnik developed a script, but Shusett's original contract guaranteed him first draft rights to a sequel and he, based on an earlier agreement, was obliged to work with Goldman. The pair's story continued from the end of Total Recall, with Mars now an independent planet. The rebels explore Quaid's mind for Hauser's memories of a mind control project. It featured several twists, including Quaid waking up at Recall on Earth, and other hints that he is living within a dream. Schwarzenegger became actively involved by 1998, but believed the idea was overly complicated. Cyrulnik wrote another draft, revealing that Hauser and Quaid are both fabricated personalities, and depicting the destruction of Mars to save Earth from a bomb placed in the Sunday. This draft was well received by Dimension, but he was asked to rewrite it to lower the budget. Development eventually ceased as a series of failed films had harmed Dimension financially, and the studio was unable to agree a deal with Schwarzenegger. The rights to Total Recall were eventually purchased by Columbia Pictures and a remake was announced in 2009. Released in 2012, the film, also called Total Recall, starred Colin Farrell, Bryan Cranston, Kate Beckinsale, and Jessica Biel. Its plot follows elements of the 1990 film but omits Mars entirely, taking place on a mostly uninhabitable Earth. The film failed to replicate the financial critical success of the original. In the upcoming section, we'll be dissecting works cited and exploring its intricate connections to our topic. Books, journals, magazines. Remember, knowledge is power. Keep learning, growing, and exploring.